Day 2 of the draft is in the books. We still got one more to go. Day 3, that is where you truly get to separate who knows the draft and who doesn't. We've got 8 players to talk about, all college guys, on today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to episode 999. Somehow it feels appropriate that day 3 of the draft will be episode 1000. I want to thank everyone who's been with us on that crazy ride. I am Jeff Ellis, one of the hosts of Locked On Guardians. Justin was going to see some friends and watch the home run derby, and I said, I got this. It's draft. Some of these guys are his guys, though, and I'm going to give credit where it's due as we're going through. I do want to take a second and say today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. 8 players today, rounds 3 through 10, some ups and downs, some general themes. Cape. I went and did the interview with the assistant head of scouting. Zoom meetings now. It's kind of nice, so I can actually do that. Mandy Bell asked one question. Paul Hoynes asked a question. I asked 2, and that was it. There was 8 people in the room, and people weren't asking questions. But, I wanted to ask, and my 2 big questions were, just to share with the group. First one was with Jonah Advincula. Now, any listeners who are big fans of the show, what I would really appreciate is I was trying to find the episode where he talked about Advincula, because I know we did. We talked about Cape performers. I couldn't find going through notes. I was going through episodes. I couldn't dig that out because I'm 99% sure that same episode I also talked about Eddie Park of Stanford. Those 2 guys both went in the 8th round. So if you can find that, if you can point me to that, comment below, DM me. I would really appreciate that, any of you listeners. But I asked Fitzgerald, blanking on his first name, how impressive is it to see this guy go from a Division III program to the Pac-12? To me, that's a huge. I want to pull up his stats too, because that's a gap. Right? Not D2, D3 to the Pac-12. He is a really strong defender. He is a 70 speed guy, and this year in the Pac-12, he hit 350 with a 455 on base and a 565 slugging. He had 5 home runs, 20 doubles. So that's what the slugging is he had a lot of speed. 12 hit by pitches. That's another theme of the day. I feel like there's someone else in this draft class who also double-digit hit by pitches. They draft a lot of guys who like to get plunked. I don't know if but, it happens. Only a 7% K rate. Walked more than he struck out. And that's, again, last year in Division III, he hit 430 with a 550 on base and a 656 slugging. So it was a little bit different. But to step into the Pac-12 and just be as good as he was, that says something to me. And that was one of those picks where I got excited about Jonah Advincula. So if you remember when we talked about him, that was one of my guys on this day of the draft. Let's flip and go to one of Justin's guys. Let's talk about another late pick, Matt Wilkinson. Fascinating. If you know the name, it's probably because he was an absolute hoss in the Little League World Series for Canada. Like, that came up repeatedly. 1 is 2, his nickname is the Tugboat, and 3, he is 6'1", either 270 or 280, depending on where you look. Now, Justin had brought him up to me because he's a lefty who was like 1 inning on the Cape, and they brought this up, and the Guardians brought this up, that it was video game numbers and his short Cape thing, and he was great there. And at the JUCO level, he missed a ton of bats. He was an Arizona State commit, so he was going to go to a big program. He's a Canadian kid, but he was going to go from Central Arizona to Arizona State. But yeah, he's a big dude. I appreciate a guy who goes with the name Tugboat, realizing that. And it's back-to-back years where the Guardians have gone for bigger lefties. Good command, good control. You can't help but wonder if you can slim him down. Like, is there more to get there? I understand the thought process. I mean, Justin, honestly, when he discovered this guy, because it was Justin, I was like, wait, we know this guy. Was like, they wouldn't, those height weight measurements are going to put him out of consideration. Well, they didn't. And, it's going to be, he's in some regards the most fascinating guy in this class. Not the highest ceiling. He's maybe a reliever, not the best player. Some would argue he's maybe the least impressive because he's a JUCO guy. And most of every other guy on this list is either a high ceiling prep guy they've drafted or someone who have performed. I mean, they went ACC heavy. I mean, after Andrew Walters, we'll get into this, but they took a lot of ACC guys in this draft, second best conference in college baseball. Hopefully they'll get another ACC guy tomorrow, Jack Payton, but that's neither here nor there. But he's just fascinating because, again, there's just, much like with Parker Messick, I was very high on him a year ago because there's a simple route to improvement, and that's just get in better shape. And that's part of the thing here with Wilkinson. He is, at his core, he's an interesting pitcher. I believe he's only 20 years of age. He'll be 21 in December. So he is, JUCO guys are always draft eligible. I believe he's a sophomore. If he had been at like Arizona State originally, he wouldn't have been draft eligible because he was not 21 yet. So he's, that's one of those interesting guys in there. In between Evan Kula in the 8th and Matt Wilkinson, we had Jay Driver from Harvard, who is another Cape performer. That's the theme of this. Every single guy in round 2, I believe, played in the Cape. I'm not sure about Alex Mooney. That might be the one exception, and we'll save Alex Mooney because he was far and away to me their best day 3 selection. I really like Alex Mooney. We'll get back to him. Jay Driver is a fastball slider guy, touch 97. They said he is undefined, which means they're going to give him a chance to potentially start, but they also recognize that he is likely a reliever. And that's, he missed a lot of bats. He actually looked better in the Cape than he did in the Ivy League this year. His stuff backed up, which is another common theme with Guardians draft picks, which is a down junior year. He was supposed to be the first guy out of Harvard. He was actually the second guy out of Harvard. So 2 Harvard pitchers went in the day 2. He's a right-handed reliever. And the other interesting thing, and another big theme of the day, before everyone outside of Jay Driver was 6'1" or shorter. They drafted the shortest guy in the draft. Well, maybe not the shortest guy in the draft, but the shortest guy in MLB's top 250 players. They drafted the smallest guy. They drafted, and as anyone who knows who follows baseball, 6'1" means you're really anywhere from 5'10" to 6'1". That is often they just go to height when you're not actually 6 feet, 6'1", because 6 feet would be a little, but 6'1" is one of those. So half of this draft class is 6'1". But Jay Driver 6'3", he throws hard. It's like they said, it's a sinker, that fastball. It's 97, a sinker slider. And here's the other thing. We're just going to go ahead and throw this out there. There's going to be comments here. Like, are they going to sign him? They're going to sign everybody. Okay. Everyone's getting signed. There's not been someone that they have failed to sign. Is it Ross Cavett since since they switched to the pool system, in terms of someone who, and in the new system where it's only 20 rounds, they have signed everyone. So they're signing everyone. But those were your 8th, 9th, and 10th rounders. As a reminder, the 9th round's been pretty good for them. The 8th round's been okay. 10th round, we're still waiting for an impact for Cleveland. That's the round that they've never had anyone. I really thought it'd be Robert Broom. Doesn't look like it's going to be Robert Broom, but no one has hit from that 10th round for this organization yet. So Matt Wilkinson, I have some hope for you. And last year they spent. I thought maybe they're saving up to get another big. Last year they took Jacob Zivin and gave him $1 million, the largest bonus they've ever given a 10th rounder. Wilkinson's probably closer to slot, maybe a little under. And I think they, famous last words, I think they've got some money to play around with when they go into, day 3 of the draft tomorrow. It's 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. The 11th round, they have gone. That 11th round is often more important to the Guardians than like the 10th through the 6th. They'll go and really target someone for that 11th rounder. So you definitely want to pay attention to that pick in the 11th round. We still got 3 through 7 to get to. We will jump in, talk about those players, some really interesting guys, including my favorite, some very small guys, and a lot of high-level performers from the ACC in a moment on today's episode of Locked On Guardians. Gametime. This is one I don't often get to read. I'm excited. Justin loves Gametime, so he talks about it. But here's on a very basic level with Gametime, we're giving you $20 free. They are a fantastic app because they let you you can see where your tickets are. It's not just like, hey, go buy your tickets and oh no, these aren't good seats. You can go in there, you can see your tickets, you can images of the seat views, so you know you're getting a good view, lowest price guaranteed, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, flash deals and last minute tickets. You're going to get a deal if it's close. If you're waiting, this is the place to go. Check it out. You want to head to Gametime, download the app, create an account, use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Why wouldn't you do that? If you're going to get tickets anyway, save $20 right there. You're getting a better deal on tickets. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On, $20 off. We're saving you $20 when you use that code Locked On. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. And I want to remind you to check out the All-Star game on SiriusXM Radio. Type All-Star, and you'll get there. And when Cleveland comes back, you can just type Guardians into SiriusXM and catch all the games. So we talked about Jonah Evan-Kula again. Won a 8th round pick, 248 overall. If you want the specific details, 6'1", 197, plus speed, plus defense, eye at the plate, high contact. I mean, we've seen a few guys like that they've taken. You can find that episode where I talked about him. I'd really appreciate it. Jay Driver in the 9th. Biggest guy they took on day 2, 6'3", like the reliever, sinker slider mix from Harvard, right-handed. If I didn't mention that, he was rated 241 by MLB Pipeline. I did not rank him. And then Matt Wilkinson, the left-hander out of Central Arizona College, as mentioned, he's listed at 6'1", 270, was not ranked. Evan-Kula and Wilkinson were the two guys who were not from the MLB top 250 in this draft. So let's go to. Let's bounce this around. I think I'm going to save my favorite pick for last, just to make you guys wait a bit. 3rd round, CJ Kafis from Miami. That was back-to-back Miami picks, by the way. They apparently liked going to that Miami program. So you had Walters, Kafis, Cooper Engel, Christian Knapczyk, Tommy Hawk, Alex Mooney. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ACC players in a row. That's why I'm laughing. I don't think I've seen that happen. 6 ACC guys in a row. They were heavy out there. A guy Justin and I both know who doesn't give us any intel, so I'm not a fan of it. I'm kidding. Mike's a good dude, but he's never given us any intel. I just know he's like a Carolina scout. So a lot of these guys were his. So good on Kuba. He was a really nice guy back when he was a writer, but he is. It follows the Guardians' motto of loose lips sink ships. He has. I've never gotten a big hint from him. I just know that if it's Carolina guys, a decent chance he was involved. And we had 3 Carolina guys from the ACC, so that's his country there. But we'll get into them first. CJ Kafis, a Cape performer, above average plus hit tool, not much power. Has played a little outfield, but he was announced by on Twitter as a first baseman. And again, in that post interview, the Guardians were talking about him as a plus defensive first baseman. So he is going to play first base. Doesn't walk a lot, doesn't have a lot of power. 6 feet even. Good performer. The only thing that's really above average is the hit tool, maybe the defense at first. Not my favorite pick in the 3rd round. 3rd round had a huge run on guys I really liked. Eric Bintoni, Travis Honeyman. There was just quite the run on some of my favorite players. Like in a row, I had like 4 guys go off my big board. There's only 3 guys left from my big board right now. Don't see any of them signing, by the way. But you never know. The 11th round, weird things can happen. My issue with Kafis is just it's a limited profile, and it's very similar to what they have. But he is also probably has the most potent bat of this group of ACC performers we'll get into. Next up is Cooper Engel, who is a 5'10" catcher, like very small. He also played second base, left field, and right field. He has good offensive performance. Listen, they did what I've asked for years. They took 2 catchers in a draft. After years and years of not taking any catchers, they took 2 catchers. He is another guy who has almost no power. Not the worst power in the class. We'll get into that. Someone got the 20 grade power, which is the lowest possible power grade. He's a decent athlete, runs well for a catcher. It's about an average run guy. Played well Is it an average hit tool? Is it, he's one of those guys that gets a 55. He's probably closer to a 50. Like the 55 is always like a bit of a check. Like if it's a 60, you put 60. The 55 is it. It's kind of one of those things we talk about. Is sometimes the 55 is, and I'm guilty of this as anyone. But here's in his MLB thing, such a Guardians thing. Just 11% of his swings resulted in misses this spring, including only 6% against fastballs. That sounds like a Guardians hitter. Probably a utility backup type, but one who can play catcher. I don't know about second base in the majors, but left field, right field can be plus David Fry, maybe you're hoping. Though he has a left-handed bat, so he's not going to be David Fry against lefties. CJ Kafis, and again, ranks aren't everything, but you go through this. Rafi Velasquez, MLB, I had him at 22. They took him at 23. He is the only player that made my top 57 they drafted. So, yeah, Clemmy, just to compare to MLB, Clemmy was 58th, ranked 50th, 23 for Velasquez, 34th. Walters, they took at 62. He's 124. Kafis, and they tend to rank these big school guys a little bit higher. He was 90. They took him at 93. He was ranked 151. Excuse me. Engel, 125. They took him at 230. They took him at 125. He was ranked 232, so almost over 100 spots, I should say. It feels like a lot of monetary savings. So the next guy up is Christian Knapczyk. I kind of liked him from Louisville. He runs really well. I liked him probably more out of high school. He is, I believe, he is the guy who got a 20 grade power rating. He is a high contact, draws a lot of walks, and here's the funny thing. So Cooper Engel in the MLB thing, just 11% of his swings result in misses this spring, only 6% against fastballs. Guess what? Connor Knapczyk missed at 10% of pitches this spring, and he's a draft eligible sophomore. No, he's a junior, including just 6% against fastballs. So Cooper Engel was 11-6. He is 10-6. I think they have a type. Knapczyk 20 grade power as opposed to 30 grade power. And I think tool wise, like he is a 55 hit as well. Like, and so was CJ Kafis by MLB, a 55 hit tool. So these guys are all kind of the same. It's a very, very similar profile. Oh no, they gave Knapczyk a 60, so a little bit more. And he's got a 65 rod, and he's definitely the best athlete of the group. 5'9", he is not the smallest guy in the group, but it is contact. It is, it's contact and speed. It's someone said, is he kind of like Ty Freeman? I'm like, he's smaller and not as strong. Like Freeman does have good EVs. He just doesn't have a great launch angle. Yeah, and that's kind of my problem. Like maybe Kafis is a starter, but these next two really feel like backup utility types. And then the sixth guy, this is one of Justin's favorites. This is somebody he talked about. And this is a draft eligible sophomore. One of two they took. Actually, they took both of them back to back, both ACC performers. We'll get into my favorite guy here in a bit, and also get into some of who's left. But talking about 4, 5, and 6 here. At 6 is Tommy Hawk, who they say is generously listed at 5'8", 155 pounds. And he is the smallest player in the 250 guys that MLB drafted. Another plus run guy. He's basically, he's got a little more power than Knapczyk, walks a little less, but he doesn't miss on fastballs. Like, this team went out of the way to draft the guys who don't miss on fastballs. He had like 7 home runs, but Wake is very hitter friendly. So that's probably like 3 in most other stadiums. Great base stealer, stole 44 and 50 attempts this year. But you look at Engel, Knapczyk, Hawk, 5'10" and smaller, between 5'10" to 5'8", all are 50 to 60 hit tools. Walk enough. Power grades are all about 30 to 20 at the very low end. Even Engel's at least an average runner, though. These other two guys are plus. Up the middle, they just all low profile. He was taken at 188. He's 238. Knapczyk was taken. I'm going to get at 161. He was rated 157. So he might be close to slot. I mean, all of them are probably close to slot, but they feel a little bit like savers to me. And Hawk, they gave him a 30 grade power, 70 runs. So better Knapczyk there, but less hit. They took a lot of, and basically has an arm to only be a center fielder, a left fielder. these guys were so similar. I couldn't get past that profile. It is, hey, these guys don't miss fastballs. They put the ball in play. There is no power to be spoken of. They run well and they can handle multiple positions, limited profiles. So those all strike me as backups. I don't love that, especially because I thought they'd be coming out swinging. Because I was talking with a draft friend of mine, and we were talking about how Andrew Walter's slot is $1.27 million. They're probably going to save $1 million there. Rafi Velasquez is probably under. Clemmy is probably full slot, maybe a little over. But Kafis goes to slot. Engel should be under slot. Knapsack should be about full slot. Hawk should be under slot. Evan Kula in the 8th, probably about full slot. Jay Driver, probably about full slot, and Wilkinson should be under slot. So we're going to spend some time in segment 3. We're going to talk about my favorite player from day 3. We haven't talked about him yet. I'm going to talk about, who are some of the best available as well, just because, it looks like they should have money to spend. It looks like they are saving up to try to pull someone in who could be interesting. And there are some names that stand out, some names we've talked about on this show that are still sitting there that make a ton of sense to the Guardians. If they don't go for one big name, but instead saving up for 3 or 4 guys, we'll let you know right after the break on today's Locked On Guardians. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I've talked about it many times. I am a person with anxiety. When I joined the Zoom to the official Guardian Zoom, my heart was beating through my chest. I have so much anxiety for things like that, especially new things. I feel like a pretender often. I feel like I didn't deserve to be there. Anxiety and stuff like that have just affected me my whole life. And, that is why it's important to have someone you can talk to, have those moments, to have someone you can trust, that you can share experiences with and talk to. Sometimes I feel like you guys, the audience, get stuck being my therapist, but it's important to have someone who is a licensed therapist who can help you out. And, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a questionnaire to get matched with a therapist, and you can switch at any time for no additional fee. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnMLB today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnMLB. I want to remind you to check out SiriusXM for the All-Star Game and all of your Guardians games in the second half. So the one player that made me... So Jonah Avankula was my second favorite pick. I got to be honest, because I remember as we talked about him on the show, I really enjoyed that profile. I thought he was an interesting player in selection. Knapsack is probably my third favorite, even though there is no power. There's a little more hit tool to him, a little more speed. Those are my top 2. Number 1, though, is Alex Mooney, the draft-eligible sophomore from Duke. He's 2 years ago when I did a way too early mock, and I might actually be able to pull this up. I didn't even think to pull this up at the time. I had him as a top 15 player before the season began. He had loud exit velocities. He had, good run times. He was a player that, if I pull up my final big board, I can probably find his exact ranking. I thought he was a really interesting, solid player. And yeah, so I found the original old mock. Oh man, Jaden Hill 3. That didn't happen. But Mooney was just maybe I didn't put him in. I think I wrote him down somewhere and then had a bad habit of not finishing these off because they were things I did for free back then. But I still was a fan of his profile. I had him 39th overall. And this is what I wrote about him back then. If Mooney gets drafted, be prepared immediately to hear that this is the first high school shortstop drafted for Michigan since Derek Jeter. He gets a ding for average tools and his age, having turned 19 at the start of July. I disagree with this assessment, as while he has a swing that is not good for power, Mooney generates big exit velocity and has great bat speed. If he adjusts approach, I think he ends up with above average power. At the same time, I think if he keeps his approach, I think he should still be a plus offensive player due to his ability to turn on pitches. He likely moves to third or second long term, but there's a chance to stick it short. He's a player when you get this, it's a bad, really written sense. He's a player when you get to perfect game relative to so his perfect game data was all 95% or better is basically when draft mistakes happen, is due to not realizing that a player who's labeled as a gamer or grinder is more than that due to an athletic profile. So I thought, even then, and I just believe it now, it's like he was a guy who kind of gets listed as a gamer or grinder, but there's more athleticism there and he gets credit for. Other guys in that class, like I had him ahead of Connor Norby, who I like now, Matt Michalewski, Joe Rock, Gage Jump, Ethan Wilson, Colson Montgomery, Trey Sweeney. I liked Alex Mooney in spite of his age, and I'm normally someone who leads into age. And, he was not great as a freshman, but he stood out as one of the best position players in the Cape, is how MLB phrases it. But yeah, he doesn't have necessarily a plus trait, but he was a solid shortstop. He hit for average. He got on base. He didn't strike out a ton. 8 home runs. I think power can grow. I think that's something you can work on him with. I just like the ceiling here. I think that this is a guy I look at as maybe he's a second baseman, but there's a chance for, I don't know if I want to go full on plus, but after making fun of people for giving 55s, it's like, I think he could be a starting level second baseman. That I truly believe that. So he's going to be over slot. That's going to be where some of the money goes. But I thought Mooney, especially in the 7th round, is a great pick. I'd be curious at the monetary cost. It is nice to see them, occasionally win a guy. And that's where you look at this and go Tommy Hawk and Alex Mooney. When they've started going against type, for as much as we talk about them being all about age models, they took Andrew Walters. They took these 2 draft eligible sophomores. They're just about taking talent. Yeah, age models help, but it's not always about that. But when we get into day 3 of this draft, there are a lot of talented players. One of the guys that stands out most to me, just in general, is... Sorry, I was just trying to switch this around and get this to go to the undrafted list. But Tanner Witt, who is my highest rated player left in general. And he did not play this year, or he did play this year, but he wasn't effective because he's just been hurt. He has not been particularly effective. He is going to turn 21. Well, he's turning 21 today, if you're watching the show. Happy birthday, Tanner Witt. But he's, his dad was Kevin Witt, who was a high pick. He's the same guy he was a few years ago. And I really believe in the profile. He didn't develop. He didn't develop at Texas. He got hurt. And a lot of things kind of held him back. He is an interesting player. Someone to watch. Cleveland loves Jay Sarah players. Trent Caraway to them in the 11th is my pick right now. I think they take Trent Caraway of Jay Sarah Catholic. I think he's going to cost a million-ish to sign. He is a guy who is 19. So that is a thing where he is an older college player, but they love Jay Sarah. They like up the middle. They like pure hitters. Trent Caraway is there. I look at someone like Caden Sorrell, who's both of his grandparents were major league players. He's kind of a fun name. Cam Johnson, Rock Chalowski were the other 2 guys from my big board who were left along with Tanner Witt. Those are the only 3 players left of the 58 players I wrote profiles for. Chalowski was always likely going to UCLA. I think he's there. Cam Johnson, I think there's a chance to get him out of LSU if someone's willing to pay the freight. One of the other top guys left, one of my last cuts was Will Gasparino, I believe also UCLA commit. I could be wrong there, but his dad is either the scouting director or the assistant scouting director of the Dodgers. So he's probably going to school. I was trying to think the college performers. You got Jared Dickey, the catcher outfielder from Tennessee. It feels like he's probably going somewhere here in the 11th round. I've seen Zion Rose was, a big name at various points. A super athletic kid. If you got some money to roll the dice in the 11th round, Louisville recruit, one of the best, just pure athletes. And then 2 guys we talked about a ton on the show. Jack Payton, the catcher from Louisville, one of the guys who really stood out that was weird that he hadn't been drafted because you look bloodlines, you look where he plays, it's a catching factory. You look at his performance, all came together and made a lot of sense. And then Rico Nishida from Oregon, who we talked about, is a solid Cape performer who went out there and had a good year at Oregon, plays all over. I don't know how much they have left. They can give $150,000 to each of these picks. Then after that, you have to take the rest from their pool. The one thing about Cleveland is they have, outside of 2020, always spent right up against the pool and gone beyond, I should say. They've spent right up against the if you go 5% over, you lose your first round pick next year. So they spend 5% minus a penny over is essentially what they do, or minus $1. Really, they go right up against it every year. They're not cheap. I did see some people being like, "Do you think they're going to go cheap because of the money and the TV?" I go, "No, they set their money for this. 2020 was a weird year. It's the only year I think they ever left some money on the table. And it was a small draft, and they got their guys, and they just happened to have some money left. And you couldn't spend it on the undrafted free agents, so it was weird in that regard as well. They've got money to spend. I'm very curious to see what they do on day 3. Tomorrow, I think Justin's going to join. I'm sure he's going to want to rehash some of the guys he likes. We'll get into 10 names tomorrow. Let's see. Any other? Cole Miller, who's a pitcher I like throughout the process. I didn't realize till today that he is Jake Miller in the system's brother. It's a big miss by me. And apparently their dad was an NFL receiver. I'm really behind on my information, but that was kind of one of the interesting things. I was very disappointed. It's a very weak name class for as good of a class it is. We didn't have any of those Sicknar Loopstock, or Handsome Monicas. But listen, you can't grade a draft until 4 years down the line. You can't really fully grade one until you see what all the picks are and how they're shifting their money around. It's a weird one. Right now, 2 best drafts, in my opinion, Toronto and Milwaukee. Those teams just crushed it out of the park. Milwaukee in particular is my number one. Getting Cooper Pratt and Eric Batoni today was great. And Toronto, they got Jace Heffernan, who was one of my favorites, and I can't remember who else they got. Landon Margulis. Cleveland had an interesting, well-rounded draft. I think they have money to spend. I cannot grade them. And it's dumb to grade it in general, but I cannot have a full feeling on this draft until we actually see what all the picks are. We'll be back tomorrow with Justin to discuss those. Thank you all for listening, rating, and reviewing, downloading. It helps. Make sure you are downloading every day and being one of our everydayers like Landon Frame or, I was trying to think who else. Moving Target. Go Guardians, go.